Hey guys. I've discussed this many times recently, but I'm at an impasse on my channel. In my last video, I talked a little bit about why and more generally about the problems we're having on the right, but I didn't quite understand the whole picture until I had a conversation about this with another YouTuber the other day that further illuminated this issue on the right and why we're kind of dead in the water. Like many people in this realm, I'm tired of discussing the symptoms of weak Western culture: open borders, multiculturalism, gender confusion, economic viability. But until I had this conversation, I didn't fully understand that these were symptomatic. I thought that largely they were the causes of this societal malaise. It was put to me like this: when society is healthy, when it has a robust immune system, it will instinctively reject subversion. Multiculturalism wouldn't seem appealing or necessary. The transgender agenda would be transparent. Devaluation of currency wouldn't be seen as economic growth. You get the point. Most of what I've identified as causal has actually been a product of our weakened culture. I think at this point in our journey, it's necessary to delve into a greater understanding of our core issues. What specifically has enfeebled us, made us susceptible to the subversion that a strong, unified nation or people would resist? Money, gender relations, sexual degeneracy, or are these symptoms too? I've done videos on the Western spirit before, they're linked below. I've always been convinced that our societies have been driven by external factors to adulterate the true intent and thus the true nature of the Western psyche, that meddling and corruption have hijacked our destiny, caused us to self-destruct, to implode. But what if it is our very nature that dooms us? I've talked about self-destructive altruism before, but I think even that was a surface-level understanding. What is it about the Anglosphere and other Western nations that is so heavily invested in this concept of unwavering self-reliance? Questioning the merits of individualism, particularly to a self-involved American, is almost unthinkable. The concepts of individualism, meritocracy, self-determination are so central to our self-perception, to our foundational principles, to capitalism and trade, to all of our laws, which expressly serve to protect individual rights. Is this something we've adopted as a people, or is it something innate to us? There is no doubt that the Enlightenment heavily influenced our societal principles. I'm not suggesting that the concept of individualism emerged with the Enlightenment, just that during this period, the merit of self-fulfillment, of the intellectual transcendence of the individual, became central. Nor am I saying that this period was misguided. Some of the most important works of literature, mathematics, philosophy, art, science were products of the Enlightenment. I'm merely discussing the unintended ramifications of the shift from seeking truth from an external force to seeking truth from within. While I'm giving disclaimers, I'm also not saying that using reason and evidence is misguided. God gave us a sense of rationality, a questioning mind to navigate the world. I don't believe we were meant to live in a dark age guided only by religious dogma. However, secularized philosophy and ethics did breed a new age of atheism and materialism. Even in the development of rationality, the focus is on this material world, on our fulfillment, our gratification, our individual benefit. I don't want to mischaracterize or simplify the works of individualist and Enlightenment philosophers in my brevity. There's quite a broad range of beliefs amongst them, since their works spanned many nations and quite a long period of time. Some, contrary to popular opinion, were even religious. Kant defines enlightenment as humankind's release from its self-incurred immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's own understanding without the guidance of another. In the most general terms, many of them believed that natural law and human reason should be the basis of any society, that man's rationality should be the authoritative guide to living and to attaining a fulfilled human existence, which often ran contrary to the concept of faith, of miracles, of belief without proof. Because intellectuals began to see the world differently with a new order, one in which man could use science and reason to control some elements of the natural world, one in which man was autonomous, free from oppressive religion and governmental institutions. The will of man was, I believe inadvertently, divorced from the will of God. The spiritual self, although recognized as part of the human consciousness, ultimately began to erode as skepticism about the unseen and the unprovable crowded out the very ability to have faith. Since this chart only begins with the silent generation and is only in America, it doesn't show the whole picture of Western loss of faith since the Enlightenment. Also, since people self-identified, it wouldn't reflect a steadily secularizing culture, even within religious institutions. But this does give you an idea of modern trends away from Christianity. 85% of those born in America from 1928 to 1945 would consider themselves Christian, whereas only 56% of younger millennials would. I believe that this line of thinking, our loss of faith and the trend towards materialism, has produced our current postmodernist situation. First, we separated from God. Then we relied solely on the wisdom, reason, and rationality of the human mind. Eventually, we fragmented to a ridiculous degree. Without a guiding principle outside of self, like faith in God, the concept of self becomes increasingly splintered and self-indulgent. This is clearly what we've seen in postmodernism, obsessions with the perceived injustices of progressively obscure minority groups. We actually have politicians vocally advocating for the right to an abortion for trannies. I think we can all agree that as a society, we have gone too far. I've spent a lot of time, devoted several videos to discussing the importance of converting the normie. And I think this was an expression of my inherited obsession with individuality. I have expressly directed people to convince average people of our way of thinking. I even made a video entitled How to Red Pill Women. But normies are generally socially aware and of average intelligence, people engaging in this current postmodern nightmare because it's normal. They will follow where they're led. They will find the socially acceptable intellectual space as is defined by the Overton window. We know this from Plato's allegory of the cave. This is an explanation by Hans Wilhelm. I've linked the original video below.
Imagine all your life you have been living in total darkness. But you're not alone. There are people around you, but you have never seen their faces. You are hearing some unfamiliar voices. They are coming closer and closer. Strangers have entered your darkness. You sense something odd about them. Who are they, you wonder? Where do they come from? You stand up and turn around. These strangers are not real. They are projections. They are shadows. It's all an illusion, a trick by some crafty puppeteers. And then you discover something else. You see a brilliant light, much brighter than the light of the lamp. You realize that you are in a cave. I need to tell the others. You race to the cave. You stumble back into darkness. You go deeper and deeper into the cave. Listen, everybody, you say. These strangers are not real. They are just shadows, a trick, make-believe. There is a real world outside with sunshine and colors and animals and flowers. But nobody believes you. Don't talk nonsense, they say. Finally, you give up. But then you hear somebody asking, can you show us that world? Together, you all climb up and up. And then you step into the real world. Your new adventure has begun.
We can't deliver truth to the average citizen that is marred by an individualist obsession and confined by the limitations of socially accepted speech and ideas. And I think that that definition applies to most people, especially considering the absurd proclamations of your average leftist, with particular regard to abortion, transgenderism, open borders. Initially, when I started working on this video several weeks ago, I was thinking we fractured along too many lines. If you split faiths in a nation, let's say you have 7 points of fracture, but then you split along racial lines, then along political lines. It's exponential. But I think I was wrong. Maybe it's about trends, the trend away from spirituality, even if enlightened thinking is foundational to our culture. Maybe the commonality of a general divorce from faith and embrace of materialism are the only divisive factors, and the rest are just minor details. Our individualism is expressed in every facet of our culture. So I guess the question is, how can we manifest the spiritual, the collective again, in the more mundane parts of our society, of our thinking, of our ways of interacting with one another, within our communities? Is the self-knowledge enough for us to move toward a new, but really an old, way of thinking? These aren't rhetorical questions. I really like to know what you think in the comment section. I can't pose any specific solutions outside of a widespread return to God. But it did occur to me that maybe the issues I've discussed are to some degree self-correcting. Nihilism has an endpoint, and the postmodernist mentality cannot endure. Humans demand to find meaning in their experiences. I used to think that hedonism was the penultimate and nihilism the final stop on the train to civilizational ruin. But what if I'm wrong? What if these lead to acceptance, to surrender, to whatever is above the material realm, to a desperate plea to find what will engage us with a larger meaning and purpose, and ultimately to a new age of spirituality? Everyone is so hopeful about Generation Z since there are suggestions that they are the product of such acceptance, that they may be more open to Christianity, to reclaiming the structure of the nuclear family. It remains to be seen, but what if this is just the natural reaction to a society built on an underlying philosophy of self-indulgence? And maybe that desire to nourish the soul lies above the relentless demands of individualism in the hierarchy of the Western psyche. I know I just made a video about how half of everything I've ever said may be incorrect, but I feel like I'm growing in my perspective. The world, our lives, make more sense to me within the context of a Christian framework. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Is the rationality of the human mind the highest power on earth? Has believing this damaged us? Would a return to faith help us heal as a people? Thanks, folks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.